Hello, pro wrestling fans. My name is Walker Stewart. I'm alongside Chris Charlton today, and welcome to another episode of the official NJPW English podcast. Chris, it's been a minute since you and I have decided to get onto a call and have a conversation about pro wrestling that the people can hear. We've had a lot of conversations about pro wrestling recently, though. Just you and
Yeah.
I guess a couple on air over the
Well,
course of a 19
yeah,
night
yeah, right,
tournament.
just a few.
Yeah, we call it the G1 Climax, and the people are calling it
Yes.
a very transformative G1 Climax final. There is a lot to get into today. We talked about 19 nights of professional wrestling. Some of them I had a couple of different guests for. A good amount of them you and I got to be together. Started all the way back in Chicago, Illinois, and I wanted to take the time to talk about it all with
The whole thing? Okay, so we'll start with night one.
you.
I can't remember.
Well, I do think that there's value in talking about night one, though, because
Yeah.
this being the first time in a long time that the G1 was able to come back to the States, and
Mm,
I think it was a very good experience. I wanted to get your thoughts as a British man living in Japan, traveling to
okay,
Chicago.
yeah, yeah. I love Chicago.
Really?
I really like Chicago. I think not that I've particularly spent too much time in Chicago, but I kind of think like if I had a favorite place in America, it's probably Chicago. So
Wow.
now that's everywhere. I've been to like probably 5 places in America, maybe 6. So that is the call from every other 45 other states that you guys have to step up,
Gotta
to step
we
up
got
the
a we got a
games.
good amount of states, Chris. I don't know. We gotta like
Fair play.
broaden your horizon a little bit. One day we're gonna
Right.
take a company trip to Hawaii, and you will not
Yeah,
rejoice because I
well,
heard you're not a beach guy.
well, no, I'm not. But one day you're gonna book that supercard in Oklahoma. It's gonna happen.
I
Yeah.
will.
Uh,
I don't want to expose anyone in Japan to Oklahoma. I don't think it's like
oh no,
it's like when we go to
the
Yamanashi. It's all
Oklahomans are
flat,
raging.
and there. I love the people of Yamanashi. I'd say that they're a bit
Yeah.
better than some of the people I've met in
They
Oklahoma. So,
oh no, they're calling it the AMA of
oh
America.
no, oh
Great
god,
Safe Fugitive takes umbrage, but great wrestling town though, you know. So
yes,
is AMA.
yeah,
Great wrestling town.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, but no, like I think it was a really great time in Chicago, you know, and I think like the fans were so buzzing for it, and I think it does speak to the potential of bringing some of these tournaments, these great tournaments, over to overseas. You know, a few years ago we had the Super J Cup, right? 2019 was across a few US cities as well. So yeah, I mean, like I kind of think spreading some of that love about some of the best tournament wrestling in the world. It would be interesting to have like a best of the Super Junior overseas at some point as well. Yeah, I think it was definitely something that it would be great to revisit down the line. Not to deprive our fans in Japan who showed up, in their droves, and we're up year on year from last year, and that's all trending well. And then of course, like 2 very very busy nights in Yogoku that ended it all.
yeah. Nearly what 50,000 or a little over 50,000, somewhere in that 50,000 ballpark when it came to total attendance for the 19 nights of G1 Climax, and a good amount of the last 2 nights making up a lot of that number. We were jam packed in Ryogoku, man.
Mm.
What a 2 day stretch that we had, and not just the G1 Climax action, of course. Like I love what we were able to talk about and what we were able to do, as a wrestling organization, talking about the past with a guy like Hiroyoshi Tenzan calling it a career with one last main event in Ryogoku, and then what we were able to see, on the other side of the ledger in the following night with Ryohei, Oiwa, and Yuya Uemura. Before we get into the Ryogoku events, though, obviously, like we don't have the time, we don't want to do it. We're not going to go night by night by night through the G1
Yeah.
Climax. But like just specifically talking about the league stage, I'd love to try and pick your brain on maybe a favorite you had from A block and a favorite that you had from B block in terms of match, or maybe an
Mm.
MVP from each block. It's really hard not to choose just Oiwa or Uemura who ended up in the final. But if you think maybe there's a dark horse name, something along that line, like I'd love to try and get into the conversation just block specific before we get into the Ryogoku card.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think the people that I wanted to see more of, I feel like we saw more of, right? I think like Oscar came into his own as a big man. I think he made a lot of great strides. Aaron Wolf was very very good, for his first G1, and I think like that's gonna continue developing. It really really felt for him like he was sort of spreading his rings and being really into different sort of styles of wrestling than what he was used to. That like last league match with Zack Sabre Jr. was tremendous in Korakuen Hall.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of it, over in A Block, I mean, Yoda Suji, we often talked about how he was sort of really stepping into that that king of sports kind of philosophy. The sort of, well, somebody else in wrestling calls themselves the last boss, but that kind of sort of last boss style mentality was something that Tsuji really embraced over the course of this tour. So then when it was, I guess, sort of boss meets beast, I think that was one of my favorite matches of this G1 was Boltin Oleg and Yoda Suji in Korakuen as well. I think the atmosphere on top of Bolton's growth, which when you consider his third G1 tournament, and when you consider from start to end of his career so far, I mean, not being, barely being sort of 3 years in the business, Bolton was exceptional. And I suppose it does sort of circle us round, and we'll get to the final. But Ryohei Oiwa and the stat our pal Okamoto dug up in the press conference the other day was something that I hadn't called either. But like Oiwa being the fastest ever from pro wrestling debut to G1 Climax winner kind of indicates how quickly things are evolving in pro wrestling right now.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the Ryohei Oiwa conversation. I mean, I'm happy to talk about that in just a moment, but like, I gotta highlight Bolton Oleg. And this is a guy who we've seen it in post match comments, we've seen it after the fights, we've even seen it within the confines of a ring. Bolton Oleg is such a respectful athlete. And I think a lot of that comes from, there's a lot of respect that has to come on the amateur mats, right? I mean, if Oleg would have unleashed the monster that we know he has inside him on the amateur mats, he might have been barred from competition, right? But professional wrestling is so different in that way where Oleg can let so much of that out. And it's starting to feel like every single G1 bit by bit, Oleg is starting to realize that a little more. And I'd argue
Mm.
that Oleg is getting into a position where he's fighting people bringing that out of him. And one of the major names that I wanted to highlight in this conversation is a guy by the name of Yuto Ice, who pushed
Mhm.
not only Bolton Oleg to that point, but really so many other people to the point of just high frustration. Right. And, we talk about like the pro wrestling high all the time. I think it was really fantastic. Yuto wasn't getting a lot of wins on the board per se, but the way that Yuto was able to push people to wrestle their best, I thought was the most impressive part of the entire tournament to me.
Yeah, and I think like in his own sort of way, and in a very distinct way to the guys that made the final, and I think that was important. We had the same conversation when we did our previous show, right? Of like, here you had a G1 where the next isn't the next anymore, it's the now. But what is your vision? How are you going to show what you think pro wrestling is, and how you want the direction you want to take things? And so when you look at Yuto Ice, you definitely saw that he has his own vision. Bolton has his own way of doing things. Suji has his own way of doing things, and so too do Uemura, Oiwa, and the rest. And I think now you add that add to that mix the fact that Shota Umino is now going to be coming back on the next tour as well, having had the frustration of missing out on G1 Climax 36. I think like this race through the autumn is going to be really exciting.
Getting into the autumn, and I'm sure we're going to do a separate episode talking a little bit more in the month of September about the Road to Destruction and the card a little bit that's already been announced, September 27th for Destruction in Kobe. But, yeah, you're right. Shota Umino will be returning within that series. I think that there's going to be a world of difference between the way that Shota Umino handles being kicked off of a G1 Climax tour due to a medical incident compared to the way that Gabe Kidd handled last year the G1 Climax exit that he had off the injury in the match with Konosuke Takeshita. And I think that a lot of that showed out for Gabe Kidd in this year's tournament. I'd love to get your thoughts on the AEW legend, Chris.
Yeah, AEW legend. Hang on.
That's what he's calling himself. I mean, this was the interesting thing about Kidd the entire time. We always talk about Kidd having such a split track focus and a multi-track mindset. Kidd was more so that than we saw him last year in 2025, I'd argue. I think very much slipping back into some old habits in a couple of different ways. And I think that even still it led to a lot of success, which shows just how
Yeah.
great of a wrestler Gabe Kidd can be. But
Yeah.
yeah, not exactly one that the Japanese people were willing to embrace this series.
Well, I mean, he wasn't supposed to be here in terms of I mean, obviously he was in the G1, but he wasn't supposed to be here for as long as he's been here. And I think he's been sort of very public about being stuck in Japan in his own in his own turn of phrase or choice of words there. But certainly, that would have messed with anybody's mental of like a 1 week trip in Japan suddenly turning into 2.5 months is something that's going to change his approach. Perhaps it's always difficult to kind of for anybody to get into Gabe Kidd's head. I think the only person who knows it well enough to be able to do that is Driller Maloney. And I think that really came out of that. Not just in the ring, but the backstage altercation between Maloney and Gabe after the G1 final. And certainly the two of them sort of talking about their past together, and that's going to lead to something very, very heated coming up in Kobe. But yeah, I mean, I think that the in ring, purely the in ring, and leave the attitude out of it. Gabe was really great over the course of this G1. It was a very, I think he's evolved somewhat stylistically, and I think like where if you looked at Gabe 2-3 years ago as being in a sort of, I mean, obviously spent that time in the LA dojo, but under the Katsuyori Shibata kind of mold. And then when he first joined or started with War Dogs, trying to sort of rage against that mold, or almost not parody it, but kind of kind of show that he was quote unquote better than it. I saw less Katsuyori Shibata in this G1. I saw more sort of Minoru Suzuki in this G1. I think like there was an air of self-confidence, the swagger. How much of that is Gabe convincing himself is a separate issue, and I think probably when he opens his mouth and gets on the mic, a lot of that is about convincing himself more than necessarily riding up his opponents or the people. But just in the way that the one thing that he does, and I think a lot of people, their impression of Gabe Kidd over this G1 was a lot of outside the ring brawling, right, and aggressive fighting. The one thing that, or perhaps from his pile drivers that were very effective over this G1, but for me, the Gabe Kidd that sticks in my mind, or the image that sticks in my mind, are those forearm shivers, man. And it was like the sort of one shot near knockout to Zack Sabre Jr. in Ota that really does stick with me. And the fact that he's he's put on, he always had size, but really, really trim with it, really strong with it, and physically really domineering. And I think that was a puzzle that a lot of people had to work out. Callum Newman had to go low in order to figure out that puzzle. And Yuya Uemura went to his technique and went to a metaphorical high in order to beat Gabe Kidd and get past that. But I think that physical imposing nature, together with really perfected forearms and elbow strikes, I think that puts Gabe Kidd, to my mind, it was a very Suzuki-esque performance over the course of this G1.
I think a lot of what you just talked about is what's going to make September 27th, the IWGP Global Heavyweight title match between Joe Maloney and Gabe Kidd, so special, because a lot of that can transfer over to the conversation you could have about one Maloney, right? And the performance that Joe Maloney put up in this G1 Climax, I every single year we are saying, his final best of the Super Junior, we said, God, what a performance from Joe Maloney. First G1 Climax, we said the same thing 1 year ago, and things continue to rise. It's been almost a bit meteoric for Joe Maloney, especially when it comes to popularity of the with the people here in Japan. I think that Maloney has been really showing something special in sort of the antithesis way to Gabe Kidd over the course of this tournament. Yes, they both had very good G1 Climax performances, but it's been so refreshing, I really think you could say, for Joe Maloney to embrace the people the way that he has. And for them to embrace him back is a whole nother level of where Maloney's at.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like there's probably the contrast as well is Gabe will tend to obfuscate and will never really say what's truly on his mind. And even if I think there are still some fans that kind of warm to Gabe Kidd because they feel he really loves this place really somewhere deep down. Whereas Dan much more sort of wears his heart on his sleeve and is much more honest about that and upfront about that. And I think like a lot of people, I mean, even Maloney has said like himself, I'm not going to be here forever, but I'm going to be here for as long as it takes to make sure I'm successful. And I think people really appreciate that and appreciate the respect that he has for the IWGP, for the G1, and on and on and on. I mean, I've said for a long time, I think like Julla's great at everything that he puts his hand to. And Maloney, no doubt about it, is going to be. I mean, I don't think he's quite 30 yet. So he's going to be a world champion, I think, wherever he goes. I think if he stays the course here in New Japan, then sort of 2-3 years from now, he could be the IWGP heavyweight champion, could be the global heavyweight champion before it. Yeah, I mean, he's an exceptional talent. He really, really is.
It was a phenomenal stage of league competition. It really was. There was a lot of great professional wrestling, a lot of stuff that I'd say, like usually, yeah, we always go, oh, we'll go back into the archives, watch it. Seriously, every single night it feels like another match of the year contender that you could put on a list somewhere in the world. Especially, given the fact that the G1 Climax, a lot of people talk about it, and this is a heavy subject of conversation for our final and our main event. But a lot of people like to talk about there being a house style in a lot of different professional wrestling organizations. This is what you can expect when you watch a New Japan Pro Wrestling event or any other professional wrestling organization, Chris. And it feels like that house style in a couple of different ways was challenged by certain members of the roster. And I think it really speaks to where we are going to go with our main event and the conversation I'm excited to get in with you later on regarding Ryohei Oiwa and Yuya Uemura and the need to stick to what you believe is the best for you and the need to be yourself in professional wrestling to stand out, working so well for both of those talents. I want to start, though, before we get there, to the semifinal night of G1 Climax competition, because a lot happened on that night. And I'm not just talking about the semifinal results, of course. That was the same night that saw the retirement of one Hiroyoshi Tenzan, but way, way earlier on in the evening, a wild Shun Skywalker appeared. And that is, I don't think anyone had that on their bingo card. Talk to me about Shun Skywalker joining House of Torture.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that a few of them had the rumor mill circling, but yeah, it was certainly wasn't until he walked out alongside House of Torture that all those pieces came together. You know, I mean, Shun carries that reputation that really kind of sets him as a natural sort of hand in glove kind of relationship with House of Torture. You know, sensational athlete, really capable of absolutely everything. Does not play well with others, and has a reputation for being, well, it's somewhat evil, shall we say? You know, and I think I did bring it up on the air, but I wonder whether that relationship was kind of forged when Shun did wrestle Evil Purge Night of Torture last November. Maybe it seemed like the seeds were being sown right there. It's hard to say exactly, you know, where Shin Skywalker will align or what House of Torture feels like. You know, still with Ren Narita in charge, I guess, but also Shin being a very, very sort of strong field. I would say a cult of personality. You know, I think almost revolves around a Shin Skywalker in much the same way that it did with Evil. So it's interesting to see how he'll fit into that group long term, and then how he'll turn out to wrestle against Konosuke Takeshita. World TV Championship is coming up September the 27th, but also, you know, we'll be seeing him in Korakuen Hall, I believe, will be the next time that we see Shun Skywalker. So how he'll fit in with the team dynamics there in House of Torture remains to be seen entirely, but I think we saw on the final night that, you know, he's definitely not going to rage against the house style of House of Torture, so to speak.
Sure. You know, the final night did see the House of Torture New Japan debut of Shun Skywalker. And that was a match where we saw some of Shun Skywalker, but I'd argue we didn't see enough. And Konosuke Takeshita might argue, hey, we didn't see enough on that night. A lot of avoidance on behalf and on the side of Skywalker toward Takeshita in that match until, you know, Skywalker had the opportunity to tag in and Takeshita's down, or Takeshita had his back turned, or a number of different situations coming. I find it very intriguing. Skywalker went to post-match comments and said something along the lines of Takeshita running from him, right? And talking about Takeshita avoiding him. So already the mind games coming into play. Shun Skywalker has descended from the heavens, has said that his, you know, Jake Lee had a conversation about vacation in hell. Shun Skywalker could only handle 1 week in heaven before deciding he was too bored, and he wanted to find himself in the midst of some darkness again. I think House of Torture, you know, I'd love to talk to you about this. House of Torture being such a great fit for Shun Skywalker. And I saw a lot of discourse. There's always going to be a lot of discourse when it comes to House of Torture conversation at any point. But I really think that Shun Skywalker, you said it yourself, like an athlete like Shun being as talented as he is, much the way we've seen every other member of House of Torture have the talent they do, just choosing a darker path in life. I think that really does fit in with what we would have seen a lot of from Skywalker in Dragon Gate. Well, of course, on the road to the semifinal, we had our first stop with Ryohei Oiwa versus Callum Newman. This is a match that was very much centered around a lot of injury that you could say Callum Newman was walking in with, a lot of which that Ryohei Oiwa really managed to target, I'd say beautifully throughout this fight. But I'll tell you here, and there's going to be a little bit of bias for me on this side, not just because we are talking about the G1 Climax 36 winner, but also, man, Ryohei Oiwa's style has really started to click for me and a lot of other people, has really started to resonate with me and a lot of other people in Ryogoku Sumo Hall made that apparent. And this the work of the side headlock on the injured body. Of course, we've talked about the shoulder of Callum Newman ever since Dominion, that injury against Yota Tsuji. Man, like Oiwa just pushed Newman to a limit here, Chris.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can sort of, I guess, go straight from this into the final. They all segue together. But yeah, I mean, quick thoughts. I think Callum Newman was, you know, in his own way, very, very impressive over the course of this tournament. Came in hurt, worked through the entire tournament hurt, worked through the entire tournament, apparently determined to hurt himself even more in terms of the risks he was willing to take. And I guess that you know, landed in very stark contrast with Oiwa's style. And then for Uemura too to kind of overcome that big boss in Yota Tsuji, I think that was really key. I think both of those semi-finals were tremendous in their own right. But Uemura overcoming Tsuji was, I think that was the big confidence booster for him. So I kind of felt like both of them going into that finals night were just about level in terms of their mentor, because here you had Uemura, who had overcome his career rival, and then Oiwa, who was just fresh off Hiroyoshi Tenzan's retirement, and kind of that encouragement as well.
Well, right before we get to the main event on the following night, it is Hiroyoshi Tenzan, who we were able to honor in what was a very, very special tribute. I said it myself on air, and I know you echoed the sentiment multiple times after the fact. The fact that we could give Hiroyoshi Tenzan that final moment, even though, and I'm not exposing anything here. It was very evident in that fight that Hiroyoshi Tenzan is nowhere close to the status he was in 2006 winning the G1, or anywhere close. But Hiroyoshi Tenzan fought like hell and gave what I'd call an incredibly inspiring performance around the age of 55, 56 years old. And I thought it was a very special moment that Tenzan and Kojima got to share in, as well as us in the English booth. I think it was very emotional on all fronts.
Yeah. I mean, clearly it was, visibly a massive struggle for Tenzan to get through the match. It was a massive struggle for him to get through the ceremony, so I think that sort of wrapped everybody up in the emotions. But you're right. I mean, I think like we're seeing a sort of wave of these retirements now. But I mean, it's one thing that New Japan, I think, really excels at, is being able to sort of recognize our history, and recognize the people that have contributed so much to that history. We'll be getting into the 55th anniversary next year, so I think there'll be a lot more kind of talk about that as the sort of next few months continues. But I mean, Tenzan, in its own way, was a thing of beauty in a sense, as as difficult as it was for Tenzan. But that's that's Tokon, that's fighting spirit, and he really sort of showed that fighting spirit all the way through the ceremony.
Yeah, I really thought that Hiroyoshi Tenzan's last stand was a really special thing to be able to be a part of. And we brought out a whole cast of characters. We had some laughs along the way. Takashi Iizuka, hey, that's finally come to an end for Tenzan. So that's something that Tenzan can finally as a career ends, so too can the pain from losing that friendship that lasted all of 3 weeks. So just a great time in the main event of that Ryogoku Sumo Hall final. I said this myself to you when after we got off the air. I was like, it felt really good to just sit back and enjoy being feeling like a fan again, in a sense, right? And being able to just kind of turn back the clock, and you and I just got to talk about the Tenzan stories that some people knew and a lot of people might not have. And I think you and I had this conversation as well. Like, Tenzan is going to be one of those guys that history, you can only hope reflects kindly upon, because he's one of the nicest individuals. He's one of the kindest people that I've ever met in New Japan Pro Wrestling. I really think I think that's why I'm so hung up on how much pride it can fill this company with, to honor people like that. Not just great wrestlers, but great people along the way, and be able to give those flowers. So, just the final thoughts on Hiroyoshi Tenzan. That has come to an end. And Tenzan would, of course, make one more appearance. We always got to get one more pop, Chris. One more Ryogoku Sumo Hall entrance for a final match that would come on the final night. But the only thing to talk about before that final is we have to talk about Callum Newman trying to decapitate Daiki Nagai in Ryogoku Sumo Hall.
With a sword.
Yes.
With a bloody sword. Yeah. I think that was, I think, Gedo's reaction to it, I think, was, whoa, come on, man.
You bully my boy.
Yeah, so, blind. Yeah, I think, I want a t-shirt that says, "What you doing, bully my boy," on it. I would wear it to PTA meetings. Yeah, I think it's a winner. Yeah, I mean, like it was a surprise, obviously a big surprise to the people in Ryogoku Sumo Hall, and a big surprise for Jeff to be in Unbound Company. And kind of felt for a second that when one JC Mateo was no longer on the WWE roster, that perhaps there would be a spot for him in United Empire. But I think Jeff Cobb, recognizing how things, how his departure, how his hiatus, as he put it, his excursion, shall we say, um, how that affected United Empire was something that Cobb, I think, is very consciously aware of. Right, he created a monster in a sense.
Mhm.
He created Callum Newman's career, you could say. I mean, whether there's a nice what if to be said about what if Jeff Cobb stayed last spring. And would that, certainly in the short term, that would have stopped Callum Newman challenging Hiroki Goto for the IWGP title? Would that send him on a different path? It's really hard to say. So here you have that situation where now Jeff's back. He's realized that Callum has had immense success. And United Empire has had immense success, but maybe in that process kind of lost a bit of themselves, or lost a bit of the morality, perhaps the honor that they used to have. And so now you have this situation where Jeff Cobb's going to be facing Callum Newman's special singles match coming up September 27th. I'm looking forward to as well Blue Justice on September the 6th, where Jeff Cobb's first singles match back in New Japan is going to be against Zane J. So that is another sort of a monster, so to speak, that Jeff Cobb created, because Callum Newman being in charge, extended the invitation, extended a steel chair to Jeff Cobb, to Zane J rather, and said, crack Daiki Nagai over the head with it. And that's now led to this Zane J Jeff Cobb match coming up on September 6th. And I think as well, there's somewhere one of the Korakuen halls is Jeff and Daiki Nagai against Callum Newman and Zane J. So there's a lot to get into there. So it's great to have Jeff back. I think he's going to kill it in United, in Unbound Company even. And it's going to be exciting to sort of monitor that through the autumn there.
Well, Chris, the match that has taken the world by storm. I have seen people who have never talked about New Japan Pro Wrestling a day in their lives on social media come around and say, by God, this is the greatest professional wrestling match I've ever seen. It is one that is just, it's been transformative, and it was one that I think we assumed would be transformative. And we talk about setting a new standard. These two men certainly did. Ryohei Oiwa defeated Yuya Uemura 35 minutes, 10 seconds, I believe just a few seconds shy of the longest G1 Climax final in history. And, I believe that coming from Kota Ibushi and Jay White, right? But
I think it was Ibushi and Sonata, I want to say.
Sonata, potentially. I apologize there.
2020.
But yes. On the other side of that, though, Yuya Uemura and Ryohei Oiwa, what we're seeing here. 35 minutes, 10 seconds, a side headlock, big rock victory that it was for Ryohei Oiwa. Chris, I mean, I just want to give you the floor, because I know that, I had conversations with you prior to the event taking place. I've had conversations with you after the main event taking place. Give me your thoughts on what this means for both Uemura and Oiwa, and do you see what other people are talking about on social media right now? The pundits at large are saying that this is going to change pro wrestling as a whole, that it's changed. Some people are watching professional wrestling right now in the modern day.
Yeah, I mean, I think, having that and being sort of on the being on the cutting edge that New Japan has been, at different points in the career. I sort of touched on it when when Uemura made his entrance. I mean, you have those moments in time where you're seeing these are game changers, right? And Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid, I wasn't born yet for, let alone in Madison Square Garden for. But definitely, I mean, I think you saw that change, that shift when Will Ospreay and Ricochet wrestled in Korakuen Hall. You definitely saw that shift when Kenny and Okada went into the Tokyo Dome, and then from there, their two Osaka-jo Hall matches afterwards. Um, yeah, I mean, I went back. I texted an old pal of both of ours in Kevin Kelly at the end of the night, and I just kind of said, I didn't know how much Kevin has been watching recently, but you should take a look at the match. And Kevin texted back. He said, I was like Tenzan at the end, tears in my eyes, and totally spent. He talked about the courage to do that match, and they've brought New Japan into a new era because everyone will try and out wrestle those two and show their fundamentals are the best. It was, yeah, I think there's so much broader debate, and I think that's a great thing, really great to have, like, right now, all of the sort of voices who are in the New Japan sphere and outside of the New Japan sphere kind of offer their takes, their opinions, for better or for worse. I think it was, it's interesting to look at guys outside and into the broader pro wrestling sphere, right? I know MJF was not very charitable towards this match. I kind of think there's something on the underneath in terms of everything that MJF says. It was, I think one of the key thing about that match, and Oiwa sort of saying in the press conference afterwards, saying that the New Japan pro wrestling in general is best where everybody is different. It wasn't so much, I think there's some people that see that match and say pro wrestling should be like this. In terms of the simple, the fundamentals, the building from A to B to C offensively, the fact that you can end a match with a headlock, the fact that the match nearly ended with a wrist lock, and that we had a near sellout in Ryogoku Sumo Hall, hanging on every second. There's a frame of mind that's saying, oh, pro wrestling should be this way, or pro wrestling used to be this way 50 years ago, and we got away from that, right? And Ryohei Oiwa was the new Strangler Lewis, like there's that mentality. There's also the mentality of they are, they were using the same sort of moves that Strangler Lewis would use, right? Or Dory Funk Jr. would use. But the actual pro wrestling, the actual approach, the movement, the fact that the man emotionness of it all was much more modern than that, right? And I think that's probably something that Oiwa and Uemura really take to heart. It's not a throwback, right? They aren't throwbacks, right? That they're taking what's old and making it new again. I think that's important. I think most of all, I think it's less about wrestling should be like this. I don't even know whether I can say that all pro wrestling should be like this. But the fact that wrestling can be like this, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Don't you think? Like, wrestling can be this way. It can succeed this way. It can enthrall and captivate and excite people this way. And more important, most important of all, is that don't let anybody tell you it can't be this way, and don't let anybody tell you it can't. That your style and your way of doing things that can't succeed, or that it shouldn't succeed, because Oiwa and Uemura over those 35 beautiful minutes really showed that anything can and should. And whether you are those guys, or whether you are somebody much more higher paced, aggressive in terms of Callum Newman, say, or someone as athletic as a Robbie X, or someone as brawling as a Gabe Kidd, or whether you're someone as hardcore as a Jun Kasai or El Desperado, right? All of this church is very, very broad, and we welcome everybody. And so, like, this was a wonderful celebration of what could be possible, can be possible again, and will be possible in the future. It was, to borrow a term, I think everything was excellently executed, and it came through in the end with Oiwa being the G1 winner.
This is a hard one for me to put into words. We're all products of our time, right? And I think that you see a lot of deathmatch wrestling in the world, and you see a lot of what people would call that the never style, the hard-hitting style, your Takagi Takeshita type fights. And you see all these different things. You see comedy style wrestling, and you can see great technical wrestling in New Japan and on the British independent scene at different places and all this stuff. But, a lot of people, the only thing that people have really said whenever it comes to winning a match with a side headlock, winning a match with a wrist lock, well, that's of a bygone era. That's of a territory. That's not of the modern day. That can't be done. People will not invest in you if that's what you want to be done. That's not what the people want to see. And these voices can tend to win out in a lot of professional wrestlers' mind. And I think that is what's so special to me, is that Ryohei Oiwa and Yuya Uemura, like, I tweeted about it earlier after the final, like what's old is new again, in a sense. And that's a cycle that happens often enough socially. And in professional wrestling, it has really repeated in a really cool way. To be able to see Oiwa walk away with the win via side headlock, work the entire match around the side headlock. Yuya Uemura, I'd argue, did not get as much of the wrist as he might have wanted in the matchup, which I think could have been his undoing. And I think it goes to speak to Oiwa's ability to avoid that technique at every single point. But Uemura was working all around the body, so who's to say on that front? I thought that Oiwa and Uemura, I think it's going to go down as one of the matches that we talk about. One of the matches that you talked about, where we talk about your Okada Tanahashi, we talk about your Ospreay Ricochet, and now we are going to talk about Ryohei Oiwa and Yuya Uemura. And what this has done, Chris, what this G1 has done is propel the guy that I think a lot of people looked at coming into the G1 Climax tournament as, well, Ryohei Oiwa was a good hand. Ryohei Oiwa was a guy who, you put him in a big match fight, he could certainly handle his own. He can hang with Takagi. He can hang with Goto, but he's not those guys. And he's managed to put himself above the echelon of some and in the echelon with others as a G1 Climax winner. I mean, the way we've seen Oiwa just shoot to the main event scene now is something I don't think anyone anticipated. I think it's the beauty of the G1 Climax, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, there's only been 21 different G1 Climax winners now, right? And there's been what, I mean, 80. Suchi's what, champion number 87.
Mm-hmm.
Albeit you take out the multiple reigns in there. So Oiwa certainly put himself on a different echelon, and you're at that time now where, Hiroki Goto, for the longest time, you could single him out as the exception to the rule that the G1 Climax winner wins the IWGP heavyweight title sooner or later. I mean, now that's not the case for Goto, and I think Oiwa as well, whether it is King of Pro Wrestling or whether it's after that, I mean, he's put himself on that top track. I mean, I think, like, at the end, somebody else said this online, I can't remember who. The point is that the fans, I think there's an aspect of people will watch this match and then be inspired by it, and then will try and win their own matches with headlocks and wrist locks, and that's great in and of itself, right? But whether they would get that same investment from Ryogoku that Oiwa and Uemura got the other night is a harder question to ask, right? Because it wasn't that they were invested in the side headlock, they were invested in Ryohei Oiwa. Right? It wasn't that they were invested in the wrist lock, they were invested in Yuya Uemura. I think that's the beauty, the key thing of pro wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling specifically, right? It was about the journey and about the fact that you look in the early phase of that match where Uemura had the headlock. Uemura just ran Oiwa out the gym for 10, 11 minutes, right? Until Oiwa got his way back into it. And everything, Oiwa was having to work for everything. And the Uemura was on top, Oiwa coming up from underneath. A key aspect to that was further deeper into the match, where Uemura, is the first time he goes for the deadbolt suplex, and Oiwa just machines him, belly to belly over the top. And that was his opening to get towards the finish. Everything was a struggle. And I think that's the key thing about the key characteristic of strong style of New Japan Pro Wrestling. It's victory through struggle. It's victory over struggle. Nothing is unearned, right? Everything has to be earned. And if the people kind of feel that that something is unearned, you will get rejected. even Konosuke Takeshita, as phenomenal as he is, when he made the G1 final last year against Evil, the people felt that Evil had earned that spot more than Konosuke Takeshita. So Evil, of all people, was getting chance in Ariake over Konosuke Takeshita. And it wasn't until Takeshita had earned that he had won and that then he had struggled under Yota Tsuji, had to submit to a Boston Crab fundamental hold, and then works his way back around to Hontai. It wasn't until this year now that the fans kind of, I think, really accepted Konosuke Takeshita, even as a triple contracted athlete. So everything Uemura, what the headlock was the culmination of coming back under a lot of hype and losing a bunch of title matches, right? For Yuya Uemura, it was getting up towards a point where he should have been in the playoffs, but he hurt himself on his penultimate league match, right? It was, again, the same attempts to challenge and kind of feeling lapped by a Tsuji or even a Shota Umino, who was ahead of him. And now here he is finally makes a tournament final in the New Japan Cup, and he's beaten by Callum Newman, who becomes the youngest tournament winner, right? He finally makes the G1 final. So everything that he has is so important to him. Everything is a struggle in the micro in terms of getting into the holds and getting out of them, and in the macro in terms of these personalities and who they are. So you look broader out, there's not that much difference between what Ryohei Oiwa and Yuya Uemura did on August the 16th to what Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Satoshi Kojima did on August the 15th, right? It was the same struggle against the foe. It was the same struggle against the self. And it's victory through adversity and it's triumph through struggle that defines New Japan Pro Wrestling, and has again with Ryohei Oiwa.
I think the conversation about struggle is something that we have all the way starting with these athletes as young lions, right? Like the whole Noge dojo system is built on the concept of struggle. And I think that's what immediately endears so many young lions to fans in New Japan Pro Wrestling all around the world, truly. But especially it's a very, I don't want to say it's a very Japanese specific thing, but there is a level of the culture here to that of watching the struggle to success, and being able to admire it, knowing that the struggle was went through, rather than just watching the end result of becoming a champion or a G1 Climax winner or whatever else. So it's been really great to see a lot of clips coming out now of like Ryohei Oiwa wrestling as a young lion and going, who knew this guy would be a G1 Climax winner? And I think a lot of people had their assumptions, a lot of people had their thoughts, but it's been really cool to see. Oh, that was only a few years ago, Chris. And it was only a few years ago that Ryohei Oiwa was trying to find his way over in Pro Wrestling Noah, and I saw some very great praise from Yoshinari Ogawa, the direction of Ryohei Oiwa, of course, through after the G1 Climax final. And I think it's all come to a head for Oiwa. But what is interesting to me, Chris, is now it's not like the train stops. The train's not stopping at this station. We're rolling right on to the next one. And Ryohei Oiwa has already called his shot for Ryogoku, is not saving his opportunity for the Tokyo Dome. And you certainly get the feeling that Oiwa is in the business of emulating what Zack Sabre Jr. did 2 years ago against Tetsuya Naito, winning the IWGP Heavyweight title.
Yeah, we'll see. He said in that press conference, all I have to do is try and make my headlock stronger. I think he feels very, very confident if it's Hiroki Goto. Goto, we didn't touch on this, but Goto challenging Yota Tsuji at Destruction in Kobe, September 27th. And, Oiwa was saying, hey, I'm 1-on-1 with Goto, and I've beaten him with a headlock. So I would be confident coming into Ryogoku again. But with Tsuji, even with Tsuji as well, Oiwa admitting that he was 0-2 against Tsuji, but that he already has a plan in mind for a Fire Blaster, So I think Oiwa perhaps is maybe considering Yota Tsuji a little bit more than Hiroki Goto, mayhaps. When time will tell whether that, how things work out that way. To just one thing that's brought to mind. I think it when I first came into the company in New Japan, so Uemura and Tsuji and then a little bit latterly Gabe Kidd with that, it was that course of Young Lions. And then we were into the pandemic. So I didn't, because it was the pandemic, we were doing a lot of remote calls and things were a little bit late in post. I never called Oiwa and Fujita's very first match. But I did call, I was in Osaka and I did call Oiwa and Fujita's both respective their fifth matches of their career. So I think like this is, I think it means a little bit something. You've said it as well when guys have come back from excursion, like Oiwa and Yuto Ice, how much that means to you. But it does kind of feel like Oiwa and Fujita are my class as a broadcaster, so to speak, as well. Then to do that, and then like the constant sort of one-upping of one another, of like best of the Super Junior winner Kosei Fujita prompting Ryohei Oiwa to go ahead and win the G1, and now here Kosei Fujita kind of feels like he has to one up Oiwa again, because now he seems to be chasing after the Never Openweight Championship. It's great to see sort of those two and their dynamic coming into the autumn and winter as well.
It was a very special match. I think it's one that people are going to be talking about for a very long time. It has certainly been one that I think people will feel the repercussions of over the course of the next year into G1 Climax 37. And, just talking a little bit about Yuya Uemura to close things off for the final conversation, at least. I think Uemura put up a hell of a fight. It was definitely a struggle we saw inside that ring. I said multiple times on the evening, it's the 1A and 1B of professional wrestling. And I really think that, one misstep from Oiwa could have won Uemura that match. It just so happens that Oiwa was able to have the advantage really, every step toward the end of that fight. And so when it comes to Uemura, though, it's got to be a tough feeling. Back-to-back singles tournaments, back-to-back final runs, and back-to-back losses.
Yeah, well, so I mean that sets it. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about this business, though, and this company. It's like when somebody loses, it's almost their journey is more interesting than the guy who wins. So where does Uemura plot his course to Wrestle Kingdom? Where does Shota Umino plot his course to Wrestle Kingdom? How does he move? Where does the Never Championship go beyond Aaron Wolf and Kosei Fujita? Fujita wants a shot. We'll see what happens. So I mean, there's so many questions now. Now we're truly on that path. We announced it for January the 4th, 2027, and we're on that trek to Wrestle Kingdom, and I look forward to it. But before that, we got Destruction, so I guess we'll circle the wagons and get back to around the microphones before you return here. But maybe sometime in the middle of the next month, and then I think we can get into Kobe, because I think Kobe's looking stacked, and I'm excited to get back into the road. I'm already suffering that G1 loss, Walker, and so I think like this 3-week gap in between matches has got me itching already, and it's only Wednesday.
Well, we're going to be waiting around a little bit longer, but we're going to be back on the air soon enough, and I can't wait to be a part of more New Japan Pro Wrestling action. We're going to be heading to Hokkaido. I'm going to get to go to Hokkaido for a night. It's going to be great. I'll be virtually there for a couple of nights as well, so there's going to be a lot to talk about there. But we're going to save it for another episode. We're running over time, and we are right back. We got a time limit, Chris, and we're running through it.
Yep.
I want to thank you, Chris, for your efforts over the course of the G1. Incredibly supportive, incredibly helpful, especially every night that you're able to join in the booth. I think it was a phenomenal time. And what a freaking tournament, man. So at the end of it all, though, we have come to the end of the official NJPW English podcast. We want to invite you, leave a review if you want. Maybe we'll read those. Maybe we won't. You decide. It is the official NJPW English podcast right here. And for Chris Charlton, I've been Walker Stewart. Follow us at NJPW Global on all social media. And we'll be back next month with another edition of the official NJPW English podcast.